My name is Annalyse Brogan, and today I will be talking to you about carnivorous plants in wetland ecosystems, the adaptations that these plants have, the benefits from them, threats that are facing them, and the conservation efforts towards these plants. In order to understand carnivorous plant traits, we need to first understand the environments that they occupy. A lot of these environments include wetlands. Wetland environments are an ecosystem type with a combination of aquatic and terrestrial traits, and they're mainly characterized by standing water in the rooting zone during the growing season. However, the amount of water present can change throughout the entire year depending on the wetland type. Along with this, there are other traits like anoxic conditions that can be found where there is low oxygen levels. Nutrient availability can also be varied. One wetland type that we often see carnivorous plants in is bogs. These are wetlands that are dominated by sphagnum mosses that release H plus ions, causing more acidic conditions. They also are closed systems, so they don't have a large inflow or outflow, and that leads to low nutrient availability, and they tend to have water saturation and more sunny areas. So they have found that carnivorous plants are an adaptation for low nutrient, moist, and sunny environments. In previous research, they looked into how these plants are related to the ratio of the amount of energy associated with building and maintaining the traits needed for carnivory, and whether or not that outweighs the energy gain they will get from the prey when they are a carnivorous plant. So when there is low nutrients and it's moist with sunny environments, they have enough sunlight to be able to do that initial cost for carnivorous traits, and then the supplemented energy they will get from the prey capture makes that worth it. We can now look into some of the traits that we see in carnivorous plants. Most of these include some sort of trapping mechanism used for obtaining the prey, and then an ability to secrete digestive enzymes that are used to dissolve and absorb the prey. These can get more specific though. With the trapping mechanisms, they can either be an active trap or a passive trap. Passive ones means there isn't any motion involved with the trapping of prey, where an active trap will have some sort of movement in the trap. I can now go over some of the examples and what kinds the examples are. I'm going to start out with pitfall traps. This is a type of passive trap, meaning that there's no movement. We see these in pitcher plants. I'll start the video. The prey will go into the plant and then they're unable to get back out. And so there they are in that fluid that has the digestive enzymes. And then there's either backwards hairs or some sort of substance that prevents the prey from being able to leave the trap. The other examples are all active traps. I'm going to start with adhesive traps. These are what are found on sundew plants. So these have a tentacle-like structure that has a sticky fluid that will also contain those digestive enzymes. This sticks to the prey so they can't release, and then as you will see here, those tentacle structures start to wrap around the prey, and more of the fluid gets in contact with the prey. Therefore, more of the digestive enzymes are getting to the prey for consumption. And then we have snap traps. These are found on one of the most infamous carnivorous plants, Venus flytraps. This involves almost like a hinge-like structure, and it will have trigger hairs. And as you're going to see here, when the prey animal triggers these hairs a couple times, the trap snaps closed, where the prey is then unable to get out and will be digested. Right. My last example is going to be suction traps. This is another type of active trap. This is found in bladderwort. So this is a hollow structure that's under the water. It works pretty fast, but like the last one, there is a trigger hair that will cause it to open up, which has a vacuum effect, and water will go in, taking the prey in with it. That can then be digested. So now I can talk about some of the benefits that we get from carnivorous plants. Other organisms are benefited from carnivorous plants as they serve as a host plant, meaning that they can live on them. This includes obligate invertebrates, meaning invertebrates that need those host plants in order to live in that area. They also have benefits for humans. This includes that they mainly feed on Diptera, and Diptera include a lot of the organisms we view as pests or that spread diseases like mosquitoes and deer fly. And so carnivorous plants help limit those populations. They are also work as an inexpensive and relatively easy biological indicator. In wetlands, it can say the nitrogen levels in an environment based on the leaf type, as some of their leaves are used when photosynthesis is preferred, and some of their leaves are used when carnivory is better. Unfortunately, around 50% of the carnivorous plant species are classified as threatened based on the most recent International Union for Conservation of Nature assessment. The biggest threats that are facing carnivorous plants is habitat loss from agriculture. This just gets rid of the entire environment that are the entire area that those organisms were living in. Other reasons for it include collection of plants from the wild, pollution, invasive species. This involves them possibly outcompeting them or even changing the environment, and then it becomes uninhabitable for the carnivorous plants. And then hydrology alteration, which can be done by humans when they drain them, or the human increasing human structures, having more runoff going into a wetland. Luckily, there are conservation efforts that are focused on these threats. These conservation efforts generally include protection, restoration, and education. So for protection, this is when a government or an organization will obtain so much land that they can then protect and avoid further habitat loss, as then people can't build on it and they are getting more um, funding and stuff like that to put into uh, focusing on the health of those areas, and that often includes wetlands and bogs and areas with carnivorous plants. Another form of protection is by implementing laws. This can help with things like pollution. It can lower the amount of pollution by requiring steps to take to avoid it. It also has requirements on like the standard of water quality. Ways that restoration is being used, a lot of that is just that there's a lot of wetland specific restoration efforts. Some of these have goals that are specific to carnivorous plants, so increasing carnivorous plant populations or even reintroducing carnivorous plants into a wetland. This can also have a focus on the altered hydrology, and they'll often try to return hydrology to its original state. This also includes trying to control invasive species population and prevent it from outcompeting and harming wetland ecosystems, and in turn the carnivorous plants. Lastly, they're trying to educate the general public. This is to do things like discourage removal of carnivorous plants from their natural habitat. Removal of plants from their natural habitat is uniquely high for carnivorous plants, and they think this is due to its strong popularity in the plant trade, and so people are more likely to want to take this plant. So they're trying to educate the general public to not take these plants from their natural habitats. To conclude, wetlands have standing water and some have low nutrient availability. Carnivorous plants have evolved adaptations allowing them to occupy these wetlands with low nutrient availability. They benefit humans and other organisms. They're unfortunately largely threatened, but there are conservation efforts that are focusing on protection, restoration, and education. I have my sources here if any of you guys are interested. Thank you for listening.